That's my theme song. Stuck in the middle with you. That's right. Because I believe that there's some smart on the right and smart on the left, but the far left and the far right, oh, no. That noise it's too much. That's where the trouble starts. Half the people are always going to disagree with you. Well, how do you strike a deal where you both get something out of it, you move on, and you solve other issues? That's why I'm told Jim Carris is running for Congress. He wants to make deals. He wants to make life better for people. And Mr. Carris joins us now. Did I describe you accurately?
Hi, Steve. You did, as a matter of fact. You did. I'm running because I'm tired of the vitriol. My family is tired of vitriol. It's taken hold of politics today and frankly, our society. And so we decided to run for office to try to change that and try to work for policy solutions that are based on independence and compassion, which we see very little of in our political sphere, and common sense. Bring some common sense back to politics.
And how about the ability to do what's right and then to be able to look your kids in the eyes and saying, I'm trying to make this world a better place for you? Because, Jim, what I find is our generation has not done that yet. When we leave this behind, our kids deserve what was given to us and a fair shot to make it better for their kids. If you go to Carris for Congress, Carris, carrisforcongress.com, you can see all that Jim talks about. Carris, about a beautiful picture of your family right there. Tell me about your family.
Well, thank you. They are beautiful. And if you notice, I'm standing behind, kind of hiding.
Yeah, that's called the Cochran.
I have a face for radio.
Oh, stop it.
So, no, I was blessed with marrying my best friend, Kimberly, 21 years ago, and we're raising three fantastic, kind children. I've got a daughter who's in college, sophomore in college, one who's a daughter who's a freshman, and a son who's in sixth grade, and they're all just great kids and just really, quality, kind people, which was our priority, my wife's and I priority when we got married. And we foster that. We try to build on that. And you're right. That's one of the reasons I'm running for office and putting myself through this. I stepped away from my professional career in commercial real estate to go ahead and put myself out there. And part of it was to set a great example for the kids and to try to make a better world with whatever I can do for those kids and your kids and people's grandkids and the future. Yeah.
And in Lake County in the 10th, we'll talk about your race in particular in just a second. But Jane, if you didn't know, was one of your Greek buddies here.
Well, I figured he was a Greek buddy of mine because of the last name Carris and also because of his trip to Athens in 1969. I was like, oh, he is Greek. In fact.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
can we?
Much so.
And by the way, thank you for bringing common sense back to the government. Can you do that and then go get all your buddies that want to do the same thing and just take over and let's get common sense back in? Because I think that's super important.
Common sense party.
Yeah. Common sense party.
Well, I tell you what, there's a lot of us, and we've just been busy earning a living, taking care of our families. But I think the wave is now to get people involved. People are getting involved that we haven't seen be activated politically in quite some time. And so, Jane, I agree with you. And I think you're going to see a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who are saying, hey, enough is enough. We need to make some real changes for the benefit of everyone, and particularly, with regard to the economy, with regard to public safety, which, as we all know, it's scary out there, and our national security, both internationally and how it relates to the southern border. The southern border is critical now, and it's affecting everyone in the country, especially, Chicago now and up here in Lake County.
One of the things we're running into with the border situation is the Senate's approved a deal. Langford, the Oklahoma senator, as conservative as it gets, or as Republican as it gets, and he worked with Biden. He came up with a deal. It's not a perfect bill. It doesn't fix everything, but it does give the president the ability to shut it down for extended periods of time as needed to try to catch up and fix the problems we have. Much more work needs to be done. The House says they wouldn't take it up. Let's say you're a member of the House now. It's unfair to ask. You haven't read the bill, all of that. But if you're seeing a step in the right direction. Is that something you'd vote for?
Well, again, I can't comment on whether I'd vote for it, unless I've read the bill. Or
Gut
not,
feel.
I understand there's a lot of money in there for Ukraine, which I think we need to support Ukraine against Russia. However, we need to make sure we know where the money is spent. That's one of my priorities. I also don't know that there's anything in that bill. I tried reading it last night. It came out late, and going through it throughout the night, trying to parse through it. I don't see anything in there about our veterans here. I don't see anything in there about the homeless, because I do see that there's, a southern border issue, but that, we're providing a lot of the concerns of Chicago and Chicagoland residents are whether or not we're taking care of those people who are here. That's been part of the concern, right? And the public safety element of it. So, again, unless I read through it in detail.
No, I get that. But as you go forward, but as you go forward in this campaign, you'll be hit with questions like that from me and other folks. Mm-hmm. Where you're going to stand on stuff like that. My whole point is simple, and that is, if you're seeing some progress, move the ball. Move the ball. Correct. And then come back and revisit it. Langford doesn't go to work and go, man, how could I make Biden look good? That's not what it's about. It's about moving the ball. In the 10th,
but I don't like the questions that are you for or against?
Yeah, that's the problem. But that's the problem. You don't get to decide which questions you like. Welcome to that world.
Sure.
But talk about your opponent in the 10th.
Well, he's been a five-term incumbent. I am. Incidentally, I am a believer in term limits.
Same here.
5 terms just happens to be that limit. So, coincidentally, he's voted on the far left with his party. He's a partisan person. He recently voted to not remove illegal immigrants who violate our Social Security laws. He's voted against an independent funding bill for replenishing the Iron Dome in Israel. And so those are two examples of how he's voted historically, which has been completely partisan. My perspective on it is, to your earlier point, if we're moving the ball forward, let's move the ball forward. Mm-hmm. And let's work out the details, and let's be reasonable with all our constituents.
And the greater good of everybody, whether they have a D or an R in front of their name, because
correct.
You'll be in a district representing both. Right. Congressman Brad Schneider, of course, who we're talking about. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a break. We come back, and then you have to enlighten us with the story, because of all the people on this call, you're the only one that's been hijacked. So I'm sure it's not a story you love telling, right, but I think it's an interesting story as a part of your life, and it goes to your larger worldview. So we'll do a little on that in just a second. The guest is Jim Carris, running for Congress in the 10th. Somebody you should know in this election year. Jim Carris is running for Congress. Part of his life story, as he seeks the 10th district congressional seat, is the fact that he was in one of the scariest situations you could possibly imagine. How old were you when the plane was hijacked?
I was 7 years old, but I tell you what, being young, it's burned in my brain.
What was the nature of this? You were flying where?
So we were flying, it was the first time back. My dad is an immigrant from Greece, came here when he was 20 by himself, started his family. He was taking us back home to Athens for the first time. And so we were flying, we had a leg over to Rome, and then flying from Rome on to Athens.
So on that flight, you're somewhere in flight with your family. Things are what they are. It's exciting. You're 7. You're on an airplane.
Yeah.
When does you realize there's trouble? Not you, but when does the family realize there's trouble?
About 25, 30 minutes into the flight. It's a short flight from Rome to Athens. And so it was fairly quickly after takeoff, it was announced that there were hijackers that had taken over. We obviously had not anticipated that at all.
Sure.
What a scary concept. With my parents, my mother was pregnant with my youngest brother. I've got 3 younger brothers and an older sister. And so, I saw fear on my parents' eyes like I'd never seen before. And now as a parent, I can't imagine being in that situation.
Well, the hijackers were there because they thought that somebody else was on the plane. It was a dignitary from, I can't remember.
Israel.
Yeah, Israel. Yeah.
Yitzhak Rabin.
Yeah.
And Rabin was not on
the Israeli ambassador to the United States at the time.
Yes, and Rabin was not on the flight. So
No.
Did they not realize that as the hijacking is going on, and did that make things worse?
Well, they were at that point about making a statement.
Right.
So when I think they realized he wasn't on the flight, they had committed to, the hijacking. And at that point, they were, it was a point of no return, actually. And so they forced the plane over Israel. And my understanding and some of the things that I've read since, that it was a female, the first female hijacker. Her name was Leila Khaled, and she was yelling through the microphone, negative epithets towards the Israelis and towards the airport down there, and then flew us over to and demanded us to land in Syria. So we landed in an isolated airstrip outside of Damascus, Syria.
And you're 7.
Yeah.
Right.
You get out of this situation. I don't want to be spoiler alert here, but you can Google this, of course. But was anyone injured before the flight was over?
Yeah. So, well, going back as we're flying, when I started to get really scared is when I saw there were fighter jets off our wings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know at that point whether they were going to shoot us down or not. You're on a plane and you have no information, right? And all you know is the plane is hijacked. You're flying around. You can look out the windows. It was a fairly clear day and see water. You see the Mediterranean. You see land, but you don't know where we're going. We just know now at this point we're over somewhere over the Middle East, and they forced the landing. We evacuate the plane. One of the things that was unique is they told us to take off our shoes so that we wouldn't tear those, the inflatable slides,
right,
to get off the plane. And my dad looked out and he saw that we're going to be running through desert. He said, "Leave your shoes on." So our family, left our shoes on, and so we slid down the slides and we're running through the desert. And to where we don't know, we're just scrambling with other passengers. We heard gunshots behind us towards the plane, and then all of a sudden the front of the plane blew up. There was some people injured, some had fallen off the wing, and there was one woman I remember had broken her leg, and they were carrying her. Other men were carrying her. I think one of the pilots was carrying her and running away from the plane because we didn't know at this point whether it was going to be a bigger explosion or what was going on. So people were just scattering.
The hijackers killed, taken, unknown?
No, the hijackers are, at least Ms. Khaled is still alive. And subsequent to that, I believe they were taken into custody. Now, we didn't know. So we were taken to, or actually we were herded up around these Quonset huts. Mm-hmm. There were some, metal corrugated huts, and they separated the men from the women. And so my siblings all went with my mother. I went with my dad. And so he wasn't alone. And he and I were sort of adjacent to this Quonset hut, and I kept looking underneath it to see what was going on in there, just the curiosity of a young boy. And they were taking people one by one. They were guerrillas who now were at gunpoint. We were all at gunpoint. They were taking people one-on-one into the Quonset hut and interrogating them. There was a makeshift desk and they were taking people and sitting them in front of this, senior officer and interrogating people. And
How long were you held?
At one point. It's hard to say because I know we spent at least a night there. They had taken us then from that point on to central Damascus. We were all put on buses and taken into central Damascus. And we were there, and they again took my parents one by one and questioned and interrogated them. And then I noticed looking out the window the next day, so it must have been a day and a half later, that there were people that on our flight that were getting on these other buses. And I told my parents, and they said, okay. So my dad went down and found out that we had been released. And so the Italian government had sent a plane for us to go ahead and evacuate out of Syria.
It's an incredible story, and I know it obviously should and does shape your worldview. And as a member of Congress, you will be a part of that. But just, I'll let you go on this. Have you ever gotten on a plane since where you haven't thought about it?
No. But I tell you what, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you the reason for telling this story again. I've told people throughout my life, but the reason is when I heard the news, the horrific news of October 7th.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the hostages there. Ours was just a snippet in time, and ours was, while it was scary, it was horrific. It was nothing I'd wish on anybody, and it's been burned in my memory and the memories of my siblings. My dad is still alive. I can't imagine what these people are going through, and that's why I'm calling for the United States to get more involved in the release of these hostages. Right. These are just poor civilians and innocent people, and we're coming on 4 months now that they've been held.
Yeah, it's unconscionable. It's hard to imagine. And listen,
right.
And that fear, that fear.
It's part of an amazing,
in a small way compared to what they're
sure. But still, I mean, listen, what you went through is God bless you and your family for surviving, and it's an amazing story. And look, I'm sure you'll be back to talk more about it, but I think you're an interesting guy. And off to a start here, which is worthy of mention, and it's one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you. So it's glad to get to know you initially, and I hope you'll come back.
Too. Well, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. And again, I agree with you that we need more common sense, middle of the road people to get us out of the problems we have now. So
it's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah,
it's the way it's supposed to work.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, man. Carris for Congress, Carris for Congress, for Congress.com. Check that out.
You got to vote.
Yeah, and you got to vote.
You got to vote.
You got to vote.
You want common sense? You got to vote.